Magic and Mystery in Tibet by Alexandra David-Neel. Chapter 2, A Guest of the Lamas. And before I start reading this chapter, I just want to say I'm sorry for any mispronunciations. A lot of these words are very foreign to me, the names of places and people. And even Alexandra David-Neel, the author, said that she wrote them phonetically rather than actually got caught up in how to spell them. So anyhow, I'm just letting you know, maybe some of my pronunciations are inaccurate, but I'll do my best here. Okay, so it's Chapter 2, A Guest of the Lamas. At Gangtok, I again met Burmiag Kushug. The Lama of Enche had left for Shigatse in Tibet, and only returned some months later. Dawasandup had been called upon as interpreter to follow the Sino-Tibetan political conference that was convoked in India. The Maharaja having died, his son, Sidkyong Tulka, I'm going to spell this name, Sidkeong, Sidkyon Tulka, Tulku, succeeded him and consequently had less time to devote to religious studies. Unexpected obstacles prevented me from completing the journey which I had planned. Everything worked against my desires. Gradually, hostile forces seemed to gather around me. I seemed to be obsessed by invisible beings who incited me to leave the country, insinuating that I should be able to advance no further, either in my study of Lamaism or upon the actual soil of Tibet. By a sort of clairvoyance at the time, I saw these unknown enemies triumphant and rejoicing after my departure at having driven me away. I attributed these phenomena to fever or neurasthenia due to brain fatigue and the annoyance at my plans being upset. Some people would perhaps have seen in this the effect of occult activities. Whatever it was, I could not overcome the painful state bordering on hallucination. Calming drugs did not relieve me. I thought that a change of scene might be more efficacious. While I was racking my brain to think of a place where I might stop without leaving the Himalayas, the new Maharaja, the Lama Tulku, without guessing that he was more than realizing my desires, offered me an apartment in the monastery of Podang, Podang, about 10 miles away from Gangtok, in the misty forests. The apartment consisted of an immense room on the first floor of the temple and a huge kitchen where, according to Tibetan custom, my servants were to sleep. 2 large bay windows let in all the light of the sky, and with equal hospitality they admitted wind, rain, or hail through large gaps on both sides, for the framework was too narrow and only joined the walls at the top. In one corner of this hall I placed my books upon a wide wainscot. I opened the folding table and chair, and this was my workroom in quotes. In another corner I hooked my tent to the beams and set up my camp bed. This was my bedroom. The middle of the apartment, too well aired by cross ventilation, became a kind of reception room for my visitors when the weather was fine. The religious music, which I had heard at Pandok twice a day before dawn and sunset, enchanted me. The small orchestra consisted of 2 gyalings, Gyalings, and then it says in brackets, a kind of hautboy, Haut-boy. So 2 gyalings, 2 ragdongs, Ragdongs, in brackets, a huge Theban trumpet, Teban trumpet, and 2 kettle drums. A bell striking a special rhythm peculiar to Eastern temples was sounded as prelude. After a few moments' silence, the deep-toned ragdongs rumbled for a while, and then the gyalings by themselves sang a slow musical phrase, supremely moving in its simplicity. They repeated it with variations supported by the bass notes of the ragdongs, in which finally joined the kettle drums that imitated the thunder rolling in the distance. The melody flowed as smoothly as the water of a deep river, without interruption, emphasis, or passion. It produced a strange, acute impression of distress, as if all suffering of the beings wandering from world to world since the beginning of the ages was breathed out in this weary, desperate lamentation. What musician, inspired without his knowing, had found this leitmotif of universal sorrow? And how with this heterogeneous orchestra could men devoid of any artistic sense render it with such heart-rending fervor? This remained a mystery which the musician monks would have been unable to explain. I had to be content to listen to them while watching the dawn come up behind the mountains or in the darkening of the sunset sky. Beside attending the daily services, I had the opportunity during my stay at Padang to witness the annual ceremony of the demons. In Tibet, later on, I saw the same rite celebrated, but with much greater display of clerical paraphernalia. But, to my mind, this diminished the picturesque character which they assumed when they performed in the shadow of the Himalayan forests. Sorcery loses much of its prestige when seen by broad daylight and in a crowd. First, the Trapas took Mahakala, Mahakala. First, the Trapas took Mahakala out of the cabinet in which he had been shut up for a full year with offerings and charms. In every Lamist monastery there exists a temple or a room reserved as a dwelling place for the ancient deities of the Aborigines or those imported from India. The latter have considerably lost rank in entering the land of snows. Unconscious of their irreverence, Tibetans have turned them into mere demons and sometimes treat them harshly. Mahakala is the most famous among the exiled Hindu deities. His original personality is a form of Shiva in the function of destroyer of the world. Having become a harmful spirit, he is held in slavery by the lamas, who compel him to render them various kinds of services, and do not hesitate to punish his lack of zeal. A popular tradition has it that a celebrated lama, head of the Karmapa sect, Karmapa, head of the Karmapa sect, attached Mahakala to him as attendant. When this lama was at the Chinese court, he offended the emperor, who had him tied to the tail of a horse, dragged behind the animal and in peril of death. The great Karmapa called on Mahakala to help him, but But the latter did not immediately appear when the Lama had freed himself by means of magic words, which separated his beard from his chin. He saw Mahakala coming towards him too late to be of any to be of any use. And in his anger he hit the poor devil such a blow that, though several centuries have now passed, his cheek remains swollen even today. Of course, the Trapas of Podang were not powerful enough to take such liberties. Mahakala inspired them with real terror. Here, as in some other monasteries, grim wonders were said to happen. Sometimes blood sweated through the boards of the shrine where Mahakala was shut up, and at other times, on opening it, the remains of a human heart or brain were found. These signs, according to the Trapas, betoken the occult activity of the terrible deity. When the mask, which represents Mahakala and in which he is supposed to reside, was taken out of the shrine, it was placed in a dark chapel reserved for other kindred malevolent deities. 2 novices watched it, repeating without interruption the magic words which prevent him from escaping. Lulled by their monotonous chant, the boys fought with all their might against sleep during the long hours of the night, convinced that if they stopped for an instant repeating the mysterious formula, their dreadful captive would take advantage of it to free himself, and they would become his first victims. In the neighboring hamlets, the peasants were greatly perturbed by the slight semblance of liberty given to Mahakala. They locked their door early in the evening, and mothers hid their children and mothers bid their children not to stay out after sunset. Less important demons, supposed to be wandering around the country seeking to do harm, were attracted by the incantations of the lamas and compelled to enter a sort of cage woven by light wood and colored threads. Then this pretty house was solemnly carried out of the monastery and precipitated with its prisoners into a flaming brazier. A flaming brazier. But the demons are immortals, fortunately for the sorcerers whose living depends upon them. Next year, the same rites must be performed all over again. A learned lama belonging to a wealthy family of Sikkim had just returned from Tibet. He became head of the monastery of Rumtek, R-H-U-M-T-E-C-K. He became head of the monastery of Rumtek in succession to his brother who had died recently. Custom demanded that he should celebrate certain rites meant to assure the welfare of the dead in the next world at Podang, the chief monastery of his sect in Sikkim. Sekkim. The late head lama was an old acquaintance of mine. I had met him at Kalimpong, Kalimpong. I had met him at Kalimpong, where he had come in the train of their hair prince, hair as in heritage, of their hair prince to pay a visit to the Dalai Lama. He was a jolly fellow, a veritable bon vivant, who did not worry himself with the philosophical problems, kept 2 wives at home, and appreciated old brandy to the extent of drinking several bottles a day. In possession of a large income, he would buy anything he fancied, right and left, although ignorant of its use. It is in this way that one day the big, powerfully built head lama came to see me, wearing the hat trimmed with pink ribbons of a 3-year-old girl. The new abbot, popularly called the gentleman from Tibet, Pod Kushog, P-O-D, 2 dots over the O, Kushog, Pod Kushog because he usually lived in this country, was quite different from his brother. He had spent his youth studying various Tibetan monasteries, and even in Lhasa he enjoyed the reputation among erudite lamas of being a distinguished grammarian. He had also taken high orders and remained celibate, which is rare among the Himalayan clergy. The funeral services over which he presided lasted for a whole week. Happy days for the Trapas of Padang, who feasted and received gifts. These ceremonies being ended in the first month of the year, Pod Kushog proceeded to the annual blessing of the monastery, escorted by a choir of Trapas, chanting a litany of good wishes. He walked around the buildings and through the corridors, throwing consecrated grain into each room as he passed by. A few handfuls of barley, cast with a gracious smile, and a liturgic wish, Tashi Shog, T-A-S-H-I-S-H-O-G, Tashi Shog, may prosperity be, in brackets, may prosperity be, rattled against my tent bedroom and sprinkled the table and the books in my study. Prosperity, prosperity, duly exercised and blessed, the monastery should become a branch of the paradise of the great bliss, in brackets, Nubdeshweshan, Nubdewacchen. Yet the monks did not quite feel safe. Secretly doubting their occult powers, and even those of the learned grammarian, they feared that a few devils might have escaped the extermination and be waiting in hiding to begin doing mischief again. They begged the help of one whom they trusted more. One evening, the Gomchen of Lachen appeared with all the trapping of a magician, a 5-sided crown, a rosary necklace made of 108 round pieces cut out of so many skulls, an apron of human bones, bored and carved, and in his belt the ritualistic dagger, in brackets, Purba, P-H-U-R-B-A. Standing in the open near a flaming fire, he drew magic signs in the air with his scepter Dorje, D-O-R-G-J-E, and stabbed the air as he recited incantations in a low voice. I did not know which invisible demons he was fighting, but in the fantastic light of the leaping flames, he certainly looked like a demon himself. My remedy had proved efficacious. Whether change of place had killed the microbes of fever, or the diversion of new scenes had cured the brain fatigue, or my unyielding willpower had conquered conscious beings of the occult world, I, at any rate, was freed from the obsession that had tortured me. Yet a strange thing happened during my stay at Padang. All right. Well, that sounds like a good place to stop. I think I'm going to pause right here and continue in the next reading. So, it's pretty exciting, isn't it? I'm finding it interesting. So, till soon.